Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Good evening. You can't see why it's.
Is my mic is on. Do you want me to introduce? Hello. Hi, we're starting our program. Hi, friends. So my name is not Carol Warden, but welcome to Science on Tap Minocqua.
How about now? No? Thanks for helping out, Bryn.
Yeah, no problem.
All right.
I don't know what's going on.
All right.
RAV guy might get demoted.
We got this. How about this mic?
Nope.
Okay. Bryn is going to read her own introduction tonight.
Do you want me to untape this from my ear and hold it to your face?
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, I know where that one is.
Oh.
Here we go, girl.
Okay, here we are, live. Now you gotta do it all over again. Good luck with that. Welcome to Science on Tap Minocqua, where it's a lively event and you never know what's gonna happen at the beginning of it. My name is indeed Carol Warden. Thank you for coming. Science on Tap is an example of the Wisconsin idea, an idea conceived in 1905 that the boundaries of the university are the boundaries of the state. Our partners in Science on Tap include Rocky Reef Brewing, the Lakeland chapter of the Wisconsin Alumni Association, UW Kemp Natural Resources Station, UW Trout Lake Station, Minocqua Public Library, and WXPR Radio. Science on Tap is supported through a grant from the Brittingham Fund to the University of Wisconsin. We have 3 ways to watch. Of course, you can join us right here like you all are. Thank you so much. You can also watch on YouTube live right now. And when you decide to watch on YouTube, you can also ask questions in the comments box, and they will come to us, and we can ask them as the night goes on also. And there is a link for that YouTube page right on our scienceontapminocqua.org website. You can also watch these events later. We record them and archive them, so if you weren't free the night of, you can come back to our website and see it there. Our next event will be Thursday, December 5th, right here at Rocky Reef. And we will be hearing from Katie Thoresen, our local WXPR radio news correspondent. So, tonight we have Bryn Lodig, and yeah, let's hear it. Bryn will be speaking about experiential learning, new approaches to teaching and learning that go beyond the classroom. Bryn received her master's degree at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, and is one of the proud co-founders of Kikori, an experiential learning-based app. Bryn is an advocate for transformative learning and has spent over 20 years using adventure as a medium to develop social and emotional skills in learners of all ages. Her passions lie in crafting and leading programs that translate outdoor experiences to lifelong learning. Whether in schools or through professional development, she does this. Bryn believes in empowering educators and students to embrace challenge as a catalyst for growth and discovery. When she's not guiding wilderness trips for others, Bryn pursues her own adventures as a pilot, a scuba diver, a martial artist, and she's constantly learning and embodying in the same way and resilience that she teaches. Per tradition, we have a trivia story about Bryn. During college, Bryn spent 2 semesters abroad. She was living and traveling with a small group of students and professors. She spent 2.5 months in New Zealand and Australia in 2003, and then another 4 months in Southeast Asia in 2004. She has some memorable stories from those travels while trekking from remote village. Some of them were trekking from remote village to remote village on the backs of elephants, traveling down the Mekong River with long-tail boats, staying with families throughout Laos, eating fried bugs that tasted like barbecue sauce, and being the first white person some of these Cambodian children have ever seen, and played games with them despite their language barrier. One particularly memorable experience, though, was while backpacking from village to village in the rainforest. As you can imagine, the rainforest was very wet and soggy and muddy and came with plenty of river crossings. Bryn's feet were so muddy that her legs slipped right between two lengths of bamboo that were used to make up this footbridge. And her leg was all the way through the bridge, all the way up to her crotch, over this gorge, and she was also wearing a 50-pound pack on her back, and it took everything she had to get upright off of that bridge. So what made this bridge especially precarious? A, because of the bridge's weight capacity, only one person could be on the bridge at a time, leaving Bryn to completely fend for herself in this situation. B, the gorge below was a spectacular 300-foot drop with nothing in between her and the ground. Or C, the bridge was over a river full of hungry crocodiles. So A, she was completely left on her own on this footbridge with a 50-pound pack. B, the gorge was a 300-foot drop. Or C, crocodiles. Ooh, mixed bag. What do you have to say for yourself, Bryn?
I don't think crocodiles live in Southeast
I
Asia.
looked it up.
Oh,
I looked it up.
I
They're
don't.
little baby crocodiles.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, the bridge's weight capacity only allowed one person at a time, so nobody was able to go help her through these bamboo slats of the bridge. I'm glad you made it out.
Oh, thank you.
Well done. And now, Bryn Ladig.
Hi, friends. I'm going to talk a little bit, and he's going to adjust the volume so that it is something we are all comfortable with for the rest of the program. I'm good. All right. Hi, friends. I'm so glad that you guys all came out tonight. It means a lot to me to see so many familiar faces. But I know that those of you who are used to coming to Science on Tap are used to a very particular format of about a 15-minute talk and then open forum discussion and questions and answers. I'm going to challenge that a little bit, and some of the people who are anxious about structure don't know this. But in true embracing experiential learning, I'm going to ask you to play some games with me tonight. So, that's my favorite thing, is playing games. But some of the background on experiential learning, I think the title of this is like New Strategies for Teaching and Learning. And the thing that I really want to stress is that these strategies are not new. In fact, they are quite old and some of the oldest ways of teaching and learning. One of the founders of the movement, experiential learning, was Kurt Hahn. Kurt Hahn was especially motivated to teach young people through an experiential modality. After witnessing in World War II, all of these young sailors were dying at sea, and not because they didn't have the training or the skill set, but because they didn't have the grit and the fortitude to survive. So he founded Outward Bound. Outward Bound then came to the States and has become a pillar of experiential learning and teaching character development. One of the other founders of this pedagogy that is more commonly referenced in the K-12 or formal education spheres is John Dewey. And John Dewey very famously says this quote that resonates so deeply with me, and that is, "We do not learn from our experience, we learn from reflecting on our experience." And I think so often two things are missing in current education, and that is the experience and the reflection. And current teaching is teachers teach the way they were taught, and this form of teaching isn't taught when teachers are being formally taught anymore. But it is something that I've become very passionate about, and it's my very favorite way to learn and my very favorite way to teach. But it is not standing in front of a group of people lecturing. So, we employ something called challenge by choice and choosing your level of challenge. And part of that is finding a way for you to participate that respects your level of challenge and doesn't push you outside of maybe your stretch zone. But I want you to challenge yourself because part of experiential learning is being challenged. So one of the things that we talk about is how to prime the brain for learning. And if you think about in this very simplified caricature of the brain has maybe 3 simple parts. And I'm going to model it with my hand, and you guys can do it too if you want. But our brain stem, or our lower brain, this is responsible for the ways that we act. And then our midbrain, or where my knuckles are, this is responsible for the way that we feel. And then my fingers is the way that we think. And the way that all those parts of your brain work together is it's a one-way street. So first, you have to regulate before you can relate, before you can reason. And if you think about it, these lower level functions are just baseline. If you are hungry or tired or too hot, I'm usually too hot, so I'm very fussy, which is why I always have on sandals. And if you watch, I'm always wiggling my feet because my feet think that shoes are foot prisons. But if I'm too hot, then I can't achieve any of these higher level brain functions. So if you think about maybe a toddler in the cereal aisle, if they are having a meltdown, they are not able to achieve some of that higher level reasoning. And that's called flipping your lid. And those things come offline. So it's a one-way street. First, you have to regulate the way that you act and connect it to the way that you feel or the way you relate to other people, and then the way that you think. And once all those systems are regulated and balanced, then you can achieve that higher level prefrontal cortex stuff. So you can do more complex problem solving. But if those systems aren't connected, you can't learn. So a lot of it is just like, okay, well, what's happening down here? Some of that is fight or flight. And fight or flight is just a very common way of saying dysregulated. And we're going to play a game in a minute, but not yet, that's going to model this. So one of my very favorite things to do is to ask people to find a partner in a minute, but not yet, and have a shared positive experience with somebody that maybe, just maybe, again, it's challenge by choice, but maybe that you didn't come with. Maybe somebody that you haven't had a shared positive experience with yet today. Again, this is the universal sign for I need a partner. Okay, and we're going to play a game called Hot Hands. So one player is going to put their hands palms up, and the other person palms down. Okay, the roles are the person on the bottom is trying to slap the hands of the person on top. The person on top is trying to pull their hands away without getting slapped. I'm going to let you go in a minute, but not yet. And the sign to come back is me raising my hand. I'm going to say, come on back. Y'all are going to finish maybe your sentence, but not your paragraph. And bring your attention back to me. And so real quick, Carol and I will demonstrate. Oh, she is really fast. So I want you to play a couple of rounds and then switch partners. So you only have about 2 minutes. On your marks, get set, go. That's a great question. All right, come on back. Come on back. right, friends. So like I said, one of the most important things is to debrief that experience. Somebody tell me, like, how did that go? It was hard. It was funny. What else was it? Stressful? Humbling? What? Oh, somebody enjoyed The Strangers. Oh, all right. So, how many of you felt some anxiety during that activity? Yeah. Anybody start to feel tingly? Did you notice your peripheral vision? Like you're so laser focused? Yeah, so there's some stuff that's happening in your brain and in your body because did everybody laugh? Raise your hand if you laughed. Or raise your hand if you smiled. All right. Yeah, so there's risk, but it's not life-threatening, right? Like, we all know that this is a friendly game, and if it wasn't, we could hopefully walk away from it. But still, your brain and your body is having a real reaction. So regardless of the fact that you were laughing, your brain was also reacting to that threat and having those feelings of anxiety. So we are going to talk about how, even though this is a friendly game, and we know that what's the risk? What kind of risk are we dealing with? A slap your hand, a little bit of pain, but generally manageable. Okay, so in this next level, level 2, because we always have to level up the game. In level 2, I'm going to challenge you to either find a different partner or the same partner and play this game, only this time the partner on the bottom is going to be asking simple math questions. All right, the rules are that it has to be single digits and you can only add or subtract. Okay, single digits, add or subtract. There's no square roots of 24s or, like to exponential. Yeah, I know there's scientists in the room. I don't care what advanced math degrees you have. That's not what we're doing. Simple, plus or minus, single digits. The person on the bottom has to ask. The person on top has to pull their hands away and answer the math question correctly. All right? Same partner or different. On your marks, get set, go. All right, friends, come on back. Okay, we're all coming back in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. How many of you guys liked that round better? I hear some no's, some yeses. Okay, what did you not like about that round? Too many things to think about doing. What else did you not like about that round? It was bad? Oh, it makes you mad? All right, what are some things you did like? More laughter. What else did you like about it? Added challenge. Yes. What else? More focused? Oh, you lost your periphery? You kept it. You noticed that you lost it. You didn't. Yeah. All right. So these activities, and you guys, honestly, I would just play games with you all night if I could. But but these games are an illustration where it is hard. How many of you found it hard to do the math? This activity was not meant to insult your intelligence. It was not meant to prove a point about that. If anything, it's that simple basic math is hard and new math is ridiculous. But what is happening is that if we are not regulated, if we are not relating, we cannot do that higher level reasoning. If we feel under threat, if we don't have that community, we cannot access that higher level reasoning in our brains. And so often, schools are trying to teach high level cognitive information with academics, with the way that schools are structured. We're asking a lot of individuals. In fact, I mean, a lot of our jobs ask a lot of us as grown-ups. And where we talk about having an experience, reflecting on it, connecting it to other areas or other information, and then growing with that knowledge, adding that to our brains and our bodies and our minds to make really complex connections and form new thoughts. We're creating team building or communication by putting kids in a canoe together, or teaching self-confidence using a climbing wall. Or even when I challenge students to maybe be, if it's a quieter student, to be the team leader and they're the only one who can talk and everyone else has to be silent while they solve a puzzle. And so you can use experiential learning for all kinds of things. I've seen really phenomenal educators, some of whom are in this room, use it in art and use it through climbing walls and challenge, and even using mountain biking as a skill to teach character development and how to be a good teammate, how to be a good friend, how to have self-confidence. And so while some people call these soft skills or character development skills, they're so necessary and they're absolutely critical in this day and age. And since 2020, since COVID, we have found that a lot of our young people are not reaching that emotional maturity in the same ways that their previous generations have. And a lot of it is because, I believe, and I'm certainly not a sociology expert, but some of it is that they're not given these opportunities to interact with one another, and they're not going to learn responsibility just by being told to be responsible. They have to practice it, and they have to try, and they have to fail. So we don't learn how to ride a bike by watching a YouTube video of somebody else riding a bike. We learn how to ride a bike by taking the bike out and failing and making all kinds of micro adjustments to our own learning through that reflection and that experiential learning process. So you have that concrete experience, you reflect on what went well, what didn't go well, why it went well, you apply it, and you try it again. And this try it, change it, try it again cycle is how we grow and strengthen new neural pathways. And for me to just stand here and tell you what you should learn isn't going to build those neural pathways the same way that play and experience does. So they say that you can build new neural pathways exponentially faster through experience and play than by reading or listening alone. And so, yes, this was just a very short little presentation on what is experiential learning. And although it says new ways of teaching and learning, these ways are not new. In fact, they are the oldest ways there are. So yeah, I guess we're opening it up to discussion and questions.
We also have 2 door prizes of this lovely book here. Mary has a bowl that you can put your name in it, and while we ask questions, we'll pull a couple names out of there. If you are interested in a copy of this book, we've got a couple of those door prizes for you.
While Amber, if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand and Amber will come to you. While we're waiting for you to formulate your questions, another thing is that there is a clipboard with my branding on it, and I have some really great infographics that I'm willing to give you guys for free. The way the format of this talk is that there is no slides. So if you want resources and examples of activities, there's a clipboard going around, and just write your name and email, and I will get those to you for free.
Hi, thanks for coming. Okay, so I read your book,
Okay.
and we were talking about it over lunch, and I said at the moment, well, where is the line between teaching academics and being a therapist, basically, is what I said. And after I said it, I thought, oh, all of this. Sorry, is that because I'm way over here?
Man, this AV guy sucks.
No.
You guys, he's my husband. I let him sleep in my house.
Anyway, everything you illustrated with the hand and what we have to learn first, made me realize that there probably isn't much of a difference as we think between being a teacher and what we would call a therapist, I suppose. So I just wanted your thoughts on that.
I think that it is a really fine line between therapy and teaching, and there's certainly a sincere distinction, because licensed clinical therapists have gone to school and have a degree, and they are certified and licensed for a reason. And I'm not claiming that. However, what I am claiming is to be a compassionate human that recognizes that students cannot learn the academics that I'm being tasked with teaching them if they're not regulated. And if they are coming into a school or a program, if they're coming to one of my wilderness trips, that if I don't address that underlying issue, that we're all in trouble. So that individual isn't being their best self, and they're not bringing their best self to the classroom, and it could disrupt the learning of the rest of the room. So, on me? Okay. So, while I think that there is definitely a place for therapy, and that even the most well-adjusted grown-ups or children could benefit from good therapy, that some of it is just human compassion.
Hi. You mentioned that there's only so much academics and reading can play in experiential learning or as learning experience as a whole. But for students that are in situations where they can't find a sense of community around them, is it possible that they could find that through reading? And is that how they could become, is not how they become successful, but is that contributing, or is it more often they find an individual that supports them and gets them through that process?
So I want to understand your question.
Sorry.
So if you're asking if they can find community through reading?
Well, so you mentioned that you have to have, like, you can't be too high. If you're too high, you won't be able to relate to what you're learning and reflect on it. And so if there's students that can't regulate pretty much any of their surrounding environment, and their only kind of escape to regulate it is through reading, is that possible, or is it from, oh, sorry, yeah. Or is it something where they do need to find some sort of support through a person. But
Yes, and I think reading is definitely a regulatory action. Some students are overstimulated and they need that lack of external stimulation, and find that reading can be a distraction. It can be a whole world where they're able to use their imagination that the external world isn't providing for them. However, you also need community, and sometimes it can be a way of hiding from community, or it can be a way of finding community. There's a lot of online, as a grown-up, groups that I have found that are really passionate about the same book or series that I am, and I find community that way. I've also seen students who are really passionate or into some niche genre of something, and they find each other, and that's beautiful and wonderful. I think it can be used as a source of community and a source of regulation, for sure. But if somebody is struggling to learn how to read, giving them a book and forcing them to read they're not going to learn that way. You have to find like a back door of how to teach it. If reading itself is causing anxiety and stress, forcing them to read isn't regulating them enough so they can figure out how to read. Does that answer your question? Oh, okay.
So, how do we go about convincing public schools to make more room for experiential learning?
Where is the speaker for that? Way back here. Oh, way back. Okay. How do we convince schools
Public schools to make more room for experiential learning?
Oh, friend. If you find that out, you let me know, because I will be there. It is quite challenging, and I think that there is a bit of a reckoning that is coming. I don't think that formal education is going to look the same way in 10 years as it does today. I think, in particular, teachers, but also healthcare workers are both finding that their systems are not supporting the individuals that are in that profession, nor is it serving the clients they are attempting to serve. And something is going to have to change. Unfortunately, we are in the depths of that right now. I don't know what it's going to look like on the other side, but I do believe in the teachers that are currently in the profession, that they love what they do enough, and the young people are resourceful and innovative enough that it will change.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. New Zealand, isn't that the #1 teaching country? And what is their secret if it is?
When I was in New Zealand, I was traveling with American professors, so I wasn't doing a stationary study abroad program like you might think of. Instead, I was living and traveling with students from my university here in the States, and we were studying adventure tourism, cultural tourism, a bunch of different things that we studied while we were traveling, and so I don't have an undergraduate teaching degree. My master's is in education. I don't know what their secret is. We could all go. We could do an immersive study ourselves.
Hello. When there's a group of people together, there always seems to be one person that can monopolize the conversation and then another person that just sits there. How do you use experiential learning to break it apart so it is a give and take with the whole group? Or just say, like you said, it's voluntary?
That's a great question. It's truly a great question, and it's something that those of us who view ourselves as facilitators, either in the workplace or even with kids, do all the time. I'm sure you guys know somebody who steamrolls conversations, and I'm sure you all know somebody else who spends a lot of time coming up with their best one-liners in the car or in the shower. And So how do we level the playing field? How do we make it so that we share the air? And one of the most effective ways that I have learned to do that with groups that I work with is a full value contract. Is before we start working together, if it's the beginning of the school year, I say, hey, as a classroom, we are a community of learners, and this isn't just you. This is all of us, and it's all of us together. And so what are the rules that we want to agree on together to make sure that we are all successful? And so a lot of times, I will play a game to illustrate these lessons. But basically, I make sure that everybody understands that it's not just about them, and that it is about the whole group, and they make the rules. And I am just there to facilitate and guide that process, but it's my job to look out for that little guy. And so we create standards, we create agreements, we create ground rules that everybody agrees to, so that when they are violated, like, hey, Johnny, you're interrupting again. You know, it's Susie's turn to talk. We can say, hey, what did we agree to back here? What did you guys promise? And my hope is always, like, and I'll put it to the group, I'm like, hey, challenge by choice. I challenge you, if you're somebody who likes to answer first, try not to answer first or second, or maybe even third. And if you're somebody who doesn't ever submit your ideas first, again, I need to make sure that there's a safe place for them to do that, but challenge them. Hey, maybe we do it this way. And if they're not going to do it in a group conversation, there's other ways of doing it. We can do writing reflections. Everybody does their own, and they get to write. We can do it like with Post-it notes around the room, and so they can see what other people have written, and we create multiple different stations. Or we do pairs, and we have a bunch of individual conversations that don't seem so threatening, because talking to one other person is very different than the performative act of standing on the stage and talking to a room of people. But there's ways that you can level the playing field, because that is really important, to make sure that everybody's voice is being heard and that everybody's being challenged, because if you're not being challenged, sometimes you act out or you disengage.
Hi.
Hi.
I have grandchildren, and they're very intelligent. Of course, I'm a proud grandfather. But at the same time, I've read that a child's personality is created from the time that they can speak till the time that they learn how to read. So if you have a personality the rest of your life based in that window, add that to the classroom, where you've got introverted, you've got bullies, you've got all this, how do you moderate? And the question is, how can we incorporate this into the school? I think it's incorporated already, and I'm thinking my 8th grade daughter, she has to be humble, okay? And I'm the smartest one in the class. Her mother says to me, how can I deal with that? I says, she has to learn humility someplace. But it's already, the whole group sees that, and she's isolated.
Yeah.
So how can what you're saying, with all the neurons behind you, with all the beer signs, how can we change that?
Yeah, I think that, again, it's providing experiences. Every time we have an experience, we start that new neural pathway, and it's creating experiences that form a different identity. And while I hadn't heard that from the time you can talk till the time you can read, I would love to know your source on that. I do have 2 biological children of my own, and one in my belly through heels and elbows the whole time, and he came out the same way. So I would argue that it was pre-speaking. His personality was developed. Yeah. But also, from my personal experience, I can say that personality can also change. And there's a lot of academic information out there that talks about how personality is fluid, but it is our experiences that shape us, and the way that we remember those experiences that form our identity. And so one of the things that can be said is that nobody fights harder than somebody who feels that their identity is challenged. And particularly in our small schools where we live here, where the students are with the same cohort of peers for so long, they often get assigned an identity by their peers. It's not always one that they've adopted themselves, but then they own that, and they own that to their core. And there's not a lot of chance for them to experience or challenge a different identity. And that's why I think adolescence is so cool. How many of you guys in here have a middle schooler or know a middle schooler or had a middle schooler? Yeah. I mean, buckle up, because that is the coolest time, where their brains are creating more neural pathways than they had since they were toddlers. And they're pruning stuff. And so they're getting rid of parts of them that they don't need, and they're challenging things that their parents tell them or that their teachers tell them. And they're trying stuff on. But if they feel pigeonholed in their identity, they'll fight tooth and nail for it. And the way to break that is to give them experiences that challenge or change that. The best way to get those different personalities to work together, I actually have an activity, and I outline it in my book. It's also on my website, but it's called Interaction Styles. And it's really understanding collaborative teamwork and collaborative leadership, and how the leader isn't always the loudest or the one who moves first. And it's finding roles for all of these different quadrants. If you think Myers-Briggs or personality profiles, it's very similar to that, but it's how those personality types interact with each other, with the caveat of it's not attempting to pigeonhole somebody into a certain identity, recognizing that it's like a full infinite spectrum. You know, if I say you're red has so many, full infinite spectrum, but it is a way to label and understand information, and it gives people a model to work within. And so look up interaction styles, and some of that is really good about how to bring out the best in your own interaction style and how to understand people of a different style than you. I hope that helps.
Where does outdoor environmental education, how would you use that? What you're saying, or is
Yeah.
it already happening in outdoor environmental education?
How do I do it? Or how do
you apply
how do I
principle to outdoor education?
Yeah, I play with kids outside. Okay.
So the question is, how do you apply this principle to outdoor education?
So how I would apply it to outdoor education. If I'm taking a group on a backpacking trip, which I did this summer, of a group of graduate students, we went on a 15-day backpacking trip, and before we went out into the wilderness, I ran interaction styles, and I said, hey, it is important that we understand this about ourselves and about each other and how we're going to interact, because while we might be happy with each other today on day one, we're going to experience hard things, and we're going to, in a stressed state, in a dysregulated state, we're not going to be able to do some of that higher level reasoning. We're going to be going into autopilot, because all we're going to be trying to do is regulate ourselves. And so we have to recognize what one another's strengths are and what one another's weaknesses are, so that if I get so dysregulated that my peripheral vision goes and I start to get shaky, all I want to do is get back to my comfort zone. And it's going to take the rest of the group to care for decisions or whatever else it is. So when it's hard, let's say weather comes in while we're on this backpacking trip, we need to get up tents, we need to make a hot meal, because some people are starting to get hypothermic. People are snapping at each other, and they're like, why aren't you doing this? And why aren't you doing that? And somebody's like, hey, I'm just trying to, they might not have the words to say, hey, I'm just trying to understand the big picture before I can fit in. Somebody else is like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? And they might have a very different interaction style. The way that they interpret the situation might be different than somebody else. So when we can have a conversation about it before we're stressed out, that helps give us the language to talk to one another, along with that full value contract and those full value agreements, so that we have language and words and structures to talk about when we are stressed so that we can still achieve whatever it is that we are trying to do together. If it's climbing, you know, a telephone pole or doing a river crossing, you know, any of those things.
You mentioned one of the steps to learning is regulation. And I know when I'm regulated, right? We all know when we're feeling great. But as a mother of two, this might be a silly question, it might be obvious, but like when they're on their tablets, they're probably not being regulated, but they seem regulated to me. Like I'm looking at them, they're calm, they're whatever, but what are the signs that your child is regulated, or what are signs that they are becoming dysregulated?
That is a great question. I love this question. It is tricky, and I would argue that we don't always know when we're regulated. A lot of people don't spend a lot of time with themselves reflecting. I think that we're very overstimulated in our current culture, and that the only quiet time is maybe in the shower. Maybe, if you're not listening to a podcast or have music going. But we are very rarely alone with our thoughts anymore. And so to really think about, when is my brain and my body connected and regulated? When do I feel good? Am I eating healthy? Am I hydrated? Have I slept enough? Is that sleep of any good quality? Like, have I moved my body in a meaningful way in the last, you know, like 1, 2, 10 hours, days? All of those things go towards regulating. But what our children need to be taught, and what a lot of grown-ups need to be taught, is what are those signs of being regulated? And they really are good quality sleep, healthy food, being hydrated, sunlight and movement, fresh air. Just being outside is regulating. In fact, our brains don't know the difference between fake plants and real plants. And so having fake plants around is regulating. There's all kinds of research that talks about how hospital patients, if they have a view of the outside, recover faster than patients that don't have a view of the outside. And the happiest cities in the world, even if they are an urban environment, have green space because it is regulating for our nervous systems. Our bodies are used to being outside. So things that are signs of being regulated is laughter, is not being agitated, not having that anxiety feeling, like on our skin and in our body where we're tingly and twitchy. And devices do tend to regulate. In fact, I mean, the top like psychologists in the world are hacking our kids and our systems because they're all looking at algorithms to how do they keep us engaged, how do they keep us in that screen, in that small world for as long as possible. And our attentions are going so fast. I tried to watch, gosh, what was it? Like The Great Outdoors, I think, with my kids. And they were like, this movie's boring, moves too slow. They're like, skip ahead. I was like, what are you talking about? This movie's hilarious. But if you look at the media that this current generation is consuming compared to what we maybe did when we were in our formative years, it's very different paced. And the advantage we have is that our brains are done forming, where adolescents are still developing, they're still growing, and those pathways are getting hijacked by the way that media is now being presented and consumed. And while they might look regulated while they're in their screen, the moment you take it away, that's when you know that you let them have it for too long. And it's so hard, because I do it all the time, where I can get more done, and they did it so nicely, they did it so quietly. But it's hard, and we don't get to parent in a vacuum, right? So we're parenting with all the other parents, and all the other kids, and we're trying to give them what their peers have, but also do what's best for them. And it's not fair. It's not fair at all. I mean, the house always wins. The cards are stacked against us. Like these big tech companies, they've got all the people and all the flashy things that are figuring out exactly how to keep them engaged for longer and longer periods of time. So, bring them over to my house. We'll play outside.
We've got an online question. Can you talk about how experiential learning works for kids that have ADHD?
So ADHD is a diagnosis that they say is attention deficit disorder. I would argue that it isn't a disorder, that the environment that they are in is disordered, that they need more stimulus for their attention. Great. So experiential learning gets them back into their body. Climbing on a climbing wall forces them to bring their brain and their body together. A lot of times when I have students that need to move their bodies in my classrooms, I tell them, you can always move your body. We can do jumping jacks, you can do push-ups, we can do burpees. I'll do a plank hold contest with you. Move your body as much as you need, but you are not allowed to disrupt somebody else's learning. So stop climbing on each other. If you are near somebody who is encouraging you to make questionable choices, move away from them. But there's this thing called heavy work, and that's like a push-up. Or they'll say carrying heavy books or boxes, or even pushing like a shopping cart. And it helps bring your nervous system back into your body. And so I get to very easily say, if you do push-ups, it'll help you climb higher and farther on the climbing wall. And so it's just training. But really, just the push-up is one of the easiest ways to reconnect your brain and your body. And so I will have them face off and do a plank hold contest. But anything outside helps engage them. When we go for hikes, if you want to run ahead, touch that tree, come back to me. And I've got some kids who are hiking miles and miles more than I am. So they're back and forth and back and forth. And as long as they are not harming somebody else or preventing somebody else from learning, then it's okay by me, because everybody learns differently and everybody needs to move and interact with their bodies differently. And I've got some that just need to hold my hand. And so we hold hands the whole time. And that feeds their connection, because all of the students need something different. And the best way to address that is smaller class sizes. But that is really hard also.
We're going to take a quick break from questions and do a door prize drawing. Oh boy.
I was told to put this way up. Way up.
Sandy Schlosser?
Oh, yay!
I don't know where they are. Perfect. Carol's got you. Sure. Bryn, are you willing to autograph them?
I sure can.
We'll do that at the end. More questions. I see a couple people up front.
Oops. Oh, when my kids were in middle school,
Yeah.
they did frog dissections.
Yeah.
And which was super fun because, kids start out kind of grossed out. And
Oh, yeah.
by the end, they're very curious, and the smell and the touch. And, there's probably people in this room that have done dissections, and they still have that memory imprinted in their head because of it's hitting all your senses. And probably 2 years after that, they wanted to go to, just the virtual online stuff. And
Sure.
I know a lot of things are going to the
Yeah.
virtual online, and I find it very disappointing as a scientist, because I think kids retain so much more. If it's
Absolutely.
hitting all their senses. So I had a question about that, and I also had a question about, or what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah.
And my son is a graduate student, and he tries to get undergraduates to help him with this research. But
Yeah.
he said he's having a tremendous problem because he said they can't focus for 2 hours on something. So anyway, just your thoughts on it.
Yeah. So the first bit of the question was just using dissection. And I think that in science, dissection is a great modality of experiential learning. It's multisensory. There is smell that you can kind of taste, formaldehyde, you're touching stuff, and it's a very multi-sensory, but also lots of times it's creatively driven, right? It's the students who just start kind of going through it on their own. Where if you watch a video about a dissection, you have no autonomy, you have no control. You are just a passive participant in that. And you're not going to learn in the same way. It doesn't activate the same parts of the brain, and you're not going to remember it the same way as that concrete experience is really going to imprint on you. And so I think that dissection is great. And I didn't do frogs when I was a kid. We did fetal pigs, and they were absolutely disgusting. And I remember it very vividly. And so, yeah, it's very cool. In fact, one of the local schools just did an owl pellet dissection this afternoon, but it was elective. And so it's one of those things where it's hard, where teachers feel like there's so much content to teach that do they have time to do something that might not be as structured. That they don't have as much control over the learning outcomes if you take the time to do something that is more experiential but more impactful. And so it is hard. It's hard, the constraints that are coming from a top-down system in formal education right now, and the markers of what success is within that formal education, both for the student and for the teacher. It's hard to measure the things that I believe matter the most. But if you can find a way to measure it, we measure what matters, or what matters. No, we measure what matters, and it's hard when you can't measure it. And then the second part of your question was the attention part of this up and coming generation. And yeah, it's true. They don't have the same attention spans that generations previously did. And so really, the recommendations, if you've not heard of it, The Anxious Generation is a relatively new book. And it's written by a social scientist as opposed to a child psychologist or a child neuroscientist. So he's looking at society as a whole. And he has 4 very specific recommendations, and that is no smartphones until you're 16, no social media. Is it no social media until 16? No smartphone until 8th grade, no social media until 16. So keeping the device out of their hands until 8th grade, no social media until 16. And then there were 2 more things, but it has to be society as a whole. If society as a whole doesn't make that shift, it was no phones in schools at all. So it was like locking phones up, like it cannot be on their person. And there was a 4th one. There were 4 recommendations. I forget the other one. Go outside? Yes, please. Go outside. Yeah. I mean, the difference between a backyard kid and an iPad kid is immense. I mean, the kids that I work with now, there's so many of them that 1, don't know how to ride a bike, and 2, have never climbed a tree. And it just hurts my heart a little bit. But some of that is not their fault. It is the generation that is raising them that isn't exposing them to some of those opportunities. And a lot of that is on our convenience. and it is inconvenient to parent. And it is inconvenient to have to guide a lot of the things because we didn't have to do that when we were forming, right? We went outside by ourselves, but we also had a lot of we had more neighborhoods, we had more multi-age environments, and some other things. So a lot of that is addressed in this Anxious Generation book. I found it absolutely enlightening, and some things I definitely push back on. But the more time we can get them to disconnect, the more we can engage their attention too.
Hi.
Hi.
I think one of my favorite things that you present is the reflection. And having taught kind of college age, I feel like even intro college students didn't know what kind of learners they were and how they assimilate information. I was curious because of all the modalities, right? Like oral, written, experience, like tactile. I wondered if experiential learning, is it universal, or are there students and people who have modalities where experiential learning actually dysregulates? Is it for everybody? And can you accommodate all different learning types in an experiential learning environment to really hit that? Because I think I see it, but I just wonder, having a child who has to be very well prepared before engaging in experience first. Just curious how you address different learning types in that modality.
I would say, again, it's another full spectrum thing where if part of the reflection feels performative, like if it's, hey, tell me how you felt about this thing in front of the whole class, somebody might be like, heck yeah, give me the mic and jump on stage, and somebody else might be like, oh, ho, 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 I haven't developed my answer yet. And so when it comes to even reflecting, maybe some people are verbal processors. Maybe they need to journal about it. Maybe they need to sit with their own thoughts before they're ready to commit them to a page. Maybe they like to doodle first. There's so many ways of reflecting, and there's so many ways of engaging in experience. I mean, there are some people who like to just meander or bop through the woods and looking at all of the different things, and there's other people who like to move their body and feel like they're getting a significant workout in, and they like to pound miles out. And so what kind of adventurer are you? Are you a high adrenaline adventurer? Do you just like to use it as reflection time? Is it a distraction? And some of that is really getting in touch with yourself and really connecting to yourself. And so I will often say that I use adventure to connect to myself, others, and nature. And that if you're not connected to yourself, if you don't take time to sit with yourself, you don't know what your autopilot is. And you don't know how to change maybe that autopilot path because you're not connected with yourself. But figuring out if I'm using adventure to run from myself or to connect with myself is a very different thing. And I feel like a lot of people understand that. Sometimes regulating activities like our devices, maybe we're going to run from connecting with ourselves as opposed to using it as a tool or a resource to better understand ourselves. And so it's that full spectrum. And yes, I think that when facilitated correctly, and when the facilitator understands that it's not about them and it's about the learner, that it can be done for all different types. But that's another thing that I talk about in my book too, is as the leader, as the facilitator, are you pushing your own agenda or are you making space for your students? And how to wrestle with that.
Thank you, Bryn. I love your book. I love you. I love everything about this exciting movement. As an educator for 21 years and a mom for that long as well, I have seen a huge shift in generational issues. And as
as this new wave of youth is rolling in, I do see, and you had touched on it briefly about those formative years, and primarily I work with children in those, birth to 5, where 90% of their brain is developed. And what I've noticed in the last 7 years or so, maybe 10, is that children don't have the regulatory skills before they're entering into school. And so my programming that I run is play-based, it's nationally accredited, and it's experiential learning, and it's outdoor education. And what I'm really trying to promote, and I wanted you to talk just briefly on it because it was mind-blowing, when I put this in front of a Board of Education about presenting this idea of collaborating, is that test scores in academics at first, when you're using this type of platform, are going to be at a low compared to their peers when you begin this dynamic way of learning. But something happens as the time rolls on, and I was hoping you could tell us about that.
Yeah, so it tends to look a little bit like a hockey stick. And so what's going to happen is test scores are going to plateau out, and it's not a linear graph. So if you think about traditional education, you're going to teach a thing, you're going to test it, and they're just going to linearly move on an XY axis. What happens experientially is when they are regulated, when they are relating to others, and a lot of times in this field we say connection before content, is that when they feel safe, when they feel connected, that's when we can access some of that higher level reasoning. And so it'll look slower at first because we are building community, we're establishing a safe place, we're creating norms, we're creating those agreements, and students, if they will challenge them, no matter what age or what modality, they're going to try and find where those barriers are. But once they have found that and feel that, then their learning skyrockets. So it's that exponential curve, that graph that looks like a hockey stick, and they will take off. But you have to, compared to their peers, but you have to stick with it, and you have to hold out, and you have to have faith. And it will happen. It's just people often give up too early. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bryn Ladig. Thanks to everybody who participated tonight, and thank you to our sponsors, the Lakeland chapter of the UW Alumni Association, Rocky Reef Brewing, Monaco Public Library, UW Kemp Natural Resources Station, UW Trout Station, WXPR Radio, and the Brittingham Foundation. We hope to see you back here next month, same time, same place, December 5th, for Katie Thorson from WXPR Radio. And you can stay informed through our email list and our website. We have a sign-up sheet if you aren't already on our email list. You can sign up there, and please go to our website and press contact us and to look for our next events. We have one more door prize. I guess I'm choosing the name. All right, yeah. We got a mic over here for Bryn.
While Carol is choosing a name, if anything sparked any interest, I do have a whole lot of infographics on my website. If you sign up for an email, I can send those to you. Anything about individual consulting or developing an adventure program, I am available. So my website is around. I have cards up here, and then my book is available.
You can talk to her after the event for that.
Yeah.
Mike Greenan. Right here? All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We'll see you next month.